Miss Beatrice Langley had perfected the art of standing where no one looked. It was not a skill she had sought, but one she had acquired through years of necessity, by learning exactly how far to drift from the center of a room, how to arrange her expression into pleasant neutrality, how to listen without seeming eager and speak without inviting more. At 32, she was neither young enough to inspire hope nor old enough to be safely invisible. She existed in that narrow, uncomfortable middle where pity masqueraded as kindness and cruelty hid behind laughter. The ballroom of Harrington House glittered as though determined to mock her. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across silk gowns and jeweled bodices, catching in diamonds, pearls, and ambitious smiles. The season was in full bloom, and tonight's assembly was one of its grandest offerings, a convergence of titled families, eligible daughters, and the men who weighed them like merchandise. Beatrice stood near a marble column, her gloved hands folded calmly before her, dressed in dove-gray silk chosen for its modesty rather than allure. It was a governess's color. Sensible. Forgettable. Safe. "Poor Miss Langley," murmured a voice behind her, barely softened by the flutter of a fan. "Still attending these affairs even now." "At her age," another replied, the words wrapped in syrupy amusement. "One would think she might spare herself the embarrassment." Beatrice did not turn. She did not stiffen. She did not flinch. She had learned long ago that dignity was her only shield, and that reacting only sharpened the blade. Once she had stood where the debutantes now clustered. Once she had danced more than once in an evening. Once she had believed herself merely late to bloom. But her father's death had left debts instead of dowries, and her mother's quiet illness had taken what little security remained. By 25 she was teaching other people's daughters to read poetry and play pianoforte while her own future narrowed to practicality. Governess. Companion. Wallflower. Lost cause. A ripple of laughter rose near the refreshment table, sharper than the rest. Beatrice's gaze lifted despite herself, and she caught the glint of amusement in a cluster of young men, idle sons of fortune, polished and bored. "She's been on the shelf so long she's practically part of the furniture," one of them said. Another snorted. A pity wager wouldn't even be worth the trouble. Something in Beatrice's chest tightened, not pain, not quite. Weariness, perhaps. Or the dull ache of knowing that one's worth had been decided without appeal. She turned away then, retreating further into the shadows, when a sudden hush fell over the room. The orchestra faltered. Conversations paused. Even laughter seemed to still mid-breath. "The Duke of Montclair," announced the butler, his voice carrying across the marble floor. Sebastian Montclair entered as though the world rearranged itself to accommodate him. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed with austere perfection, the Duke of Montclair possessed the kind of presence that did not demand attention. It commanded it. His dark hair was neatly cut, his expression unreadable, his bearing so controlled that it bordered on cold. At 35 he was England's wealthiest duke, owner of vast estates and a reputation for merciless standards. He was also famously unattached, despite years of eager maneuvering by the ton. Beatrice had seen him before, of course. Everyone had. But she had never looked at him closely. Now she did, only because his gaze had shifted. It was not fixed upon the debutantes, nor the glittering heiresses so carefully arranged within his path. Instead, his eyes had narrowed slightly, his attention drawn to the very corner Beatrice occupied. To the men still chuckling. "Part of the furniture," one repeated, softer this time as though conscious of the Duke's proximity. Sebastian Montclair stopped. The pause was brief but deliberate. His eyes flicked to the speaker, cool, assessing, sharp enough to silence the group entirely. "Amusing," he said at last, his voice low and precise. "You find her existence entertaining?" The young man flushed. I meant no harm, Your Grace. Only that." "That what?" Sebastian pressed. "That she is, well, unlikely." The Duke's gaze shifted then, not back to the men but past them. To Beatrice. Their eyes met across the room and something unexpected happened. He did not look through her. He did not glance away. He studied her, truly studied her, with an intensity that made her breath catch before she could stop it. Not with hunger nor pity but with sharp, unsettling interest. Beatrice felt suddenly exposed as though years of careful restraint had been stripped away in an instant. Sebastian turned back to his companions, his expression unreadable. "You are correct," he said quietly. "She is unlikely." A murmur of agreement followed, relieved, smug. Then the Duke added, "Which is precisely why she interests me." Laughter broke out, uncertain at first, then bolder. Lord Ashcombe grinned. "You don't mean—" "I do," Sebastian replied coolly. "I am weary of perfection. Of simpering compliance. Of beauty without substance." He lifted his glass. "I propose a wager." The room seemed to lean inward. "At the season's grandest ball," he continued, "I shall escort Miss Beatrice Langley. I shall place her at the center of society's gaze and prove, once and for all, that your standards are as hollow as your laughter." Beatrice did not hear the rest. Her pulse thundered in her ears, her skin warming with a mixture of disbelief and something dangerously close to humiliation. She had not agreed to this. Had not been consulted. Had not been invited into the conversation at all. He was not a lesson. He was not a tool. And as Sebastian Montclair's gaze found hers once more, steady, unapologetic, Beatrice Langley understood one thing with chilling clarity. Whatever game the Duke believed he was playing, she would not survive it unscathed. Nor she suspected would he. London did not forget. By the following morning, the Duke of Montclair's wager had slithered through drawing rooms, breakfast tables, and servants' corridors with remarkable efficiency. By afternoon, it had hardened into something sharper. Speculation edged with anticipation, cruelty dressed as curiosity. Beatrice Langley learned of it not from the Duke, nor from any gentleman brave enough to speak to her directly, but from the pause in conversation when she entered a room. From the way eyes lingered too long. From the sudden politeness of women who had once ignored her entirely. From the pity that crept into smiles where mockery had once lived. She was seated in the small morning parlor of the townhouse where she served as governess to the Whitcomb children, correcting a French exercise, when Mrs. Whitcomb herself swept in, cheeks flushed with excitement. "My dear Miss Langley," she exclaimed, taking a seat opposite her without invitation, "you are quite the subject of interest today." Beatrice's pen paused. "Am I?" Mrs. Whitcomb leaned forward conspiratorially. "The Duke of Montclair. Certainly. To the sovereign ball." Beatrice closed the book gently. "So I have heard." "You have heard." Mrs. Whitcomb blinked. "Then it is true?" "It appears," Beatrice said evenly, "that His Grace has made a public declaration without troubling himself to seek my consent." Mrs. Whitcomb laughed lightly as though this were charming rather than alarming. Men of his rank rarely trouble themselves with such formalities. Beatrice met her gaze, calm and unyielding. "I am not an ornament, Mrs. Whitcomb." The woman cleared her throat. "Of course not. But you must admit, it is an extraordinary opportunity. The ton will be watching." That, Beatrice thought grimly, was precisely the problem. She had just risen to take her leave when the footman appeared at the door. "The Duke of Montclair, madam." The room seemed to shrink. Sebastian Montclair entered with his usual controlled assurance, dressed in a dark morning coat that emphasized his height and authority. He bowed, formally, correctly, first to Mrs. Whitcomb, then to Beatrice. "Miss Langley," he said, "I hoped you might spare me a moment." Mrs. Whitcomb all but beamed. "Of course. I shall leave you." The door closed behind her with a decisive click. Silence stretched between them. Beatrice did not offer him a seat. Sebastian observed her with that same unsettling attention, as though she were a puzzle he had no intention of abandoning. "You are displeased," he said. "That is a generous understatement, Your Grace." He inclined his head slightly. "I suspected as much." "Then you suspected correctly," Beatrice replied. "You have made me the centerpiece of a spectacle without my permission." "A wager," he corrected calmly. Her eyes sharpened. "I am aware of the term." Sebastian's mouth twitched, not amusement but something closer to discomfort. "I intended no insult." "And yet," Beatrice said, her voice measured but firm, "you reduced me to a demonstration. A point to be proven. He held her gaze. Would you have preferred I said nothing? That I allowed them to continue laughing? That is not your concern, she shot back. Nor is my worth something for you to defend in public while denying me dignity in private. The words landed. For the first time Sebastian Montclair looked unsettled. You speak as though I have wronged you. You have, Beatrice said simply. Not out of malice perhaps but arrogance. He was silent for a long moment. Most women she knew would have softened. Would have apologized. Would have reached for gratitude. But Beatrice had spent too many years being quietly diminished to accept even well-intentioned condescension. I will not be paraded, she continued. I will not be displayed as proof of your enlightenment. And I will not attend that ball unless my presence is desired for myself, not as a corrective lesson for idle men. Sebastian exhaled slowly. Then allow me to ask you something, Miss Langley. She lifted her chin. You may. If I were to withdraw the wager entirely, publicly without qualification, would you still refuse? The question surprised her. She hesitated just a fraction. I would, she said at last. Because the damage would remain. Then what would you have of me? Her gaze did not waver. Honesty. Sebastian studied her as though seeing her anew. You believe me incapable of it. I believe, Beatrice said carefully, that you have never been required to practice it. A dangerous statement. Instead of anger, however, something like reluctant admiration flickered across his face. Very well, he said. Then here is the truth. He stepped closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance enough that his presence could not be ignored. I did overhear cruelty. I did act impulsively. And yes, pride played its part. But I did not choose you at random. She frowned. You did not know me. I know enough, he replied. You listened while others spoke. You observed without desperation. You carried mockery without bitterness. He paused. That is rare. Her breath caught despite herself. You interest me, Miss Langley, Sebastian continued. Not as a prop. Not as a cause. As a woman. The words should not have affected her. They did. Beatrice folded her hands to steady them. Interest is not enough to justify the risk you have placed me in. I agree, he said quietly. Which is why I am here. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small card, setting it on the table between them. An invitation, he said. Not to the ball. To my town residence. Tomorrow afternoon. No witnesses. No wagers. Merely conversation. He stared at the card. And if I refuse? Then I shall apologize publicly and withdraw entirely, Sebastian said without hesitation. You will never hear my name again. Beatrice searched his face for deception. She found none. You are accustomed to control, she said slowly. Yes. And you dislike being challenged. He almost smiled. Immensely. She considered the card. For years she had survived by remaining on the margins, safe, unseen, untouched. This invitation threatened that carefully built distance. But something in his manner, not charm, not dominance but restraint, made refusal feel like cowardice. I will come, she said at last. On one condition. Sebastian inclined his head. Name it. You do not speak for me, Beatrice said. Not in ballrooms. Not in wagers. Not in rooms where laughter comes easily. His gaze softened, sharpened, steadied, all at once. Agreed, he said. On my honor. When he left, the room felt oddly diminished without him. Beatrice sank into her chair, her pulse unsteady. She had not intended to provoke him. She had not intended to intrigue him. Yet as she stared at the simple cream card bearing his name, she could not shake the sense that she had stepped onto dangerous ground. Because if Sebastian Montclair was beginning to see her, then the fall, should it come, would be devastating. Sebastian Montclair's town residence was nothing like Beatrice had expected. There were no ostentatious displays of wealth, no gilded excess meant to intimidate or impress. Instead, the drawing room she was shown into was restrained to the point of severity, dark wood shelves lined with books, tall windows admitting pale afternoon light, and furniture arranged for function rather than display. Felt lived in, which unsettled her far more than grandeur would have. Sebastian entered moments later, dismissing the footman with a nod. He removed his gloves slowly, deliberately, as though grounding himself before turning to face her. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "And yet," he replied, studying her carefully, "you look as though you are prepared to leave at the first provocation." Beatrice allowed herself a small, wry smile. "Experience has taught me the wisdom of readiness." He gestured toward a chair. "Then allow me to prove myself worth your patience." They spoke first of innocuous things: books, education, the children under her care. Sebastian listened with an intensity that made Beatrice acutely aware of her own voice, her expressions, the cadence of her thoughts. He did not interrupt, did not redirect, did not assume. It had been years since anyone had listened to her this way. "You do not resent your position," he observed at last. "I resent injustice," Beatrice corrected. "Not labor." His gaze sharpened. "Most in your position would curse the necessity of it." "Most," she replied calmly, "have never been forced to look honestly at the world beyond ballrooms." Silence followed, charged, thoughtful. "You see people," Sebastian said slowly, "not as they wish to be seen but as they are." "And you," Beatrice countered, "are accustomed to being seen as inevitable." His brow furrowed. "Inevitable. Your authority, your presence, your future. No one questions that it belongs to you." The truth of it struck him harder than she expected. "Do you question it?" he asked quietly. "Yes." The answer startled them both. Sebastian leaned back slightly, studying her anew. "You are dangerous, Miss Langley." She met his gaze steadily. "Only to illusions." That was the moment, though neither would later be able to say why, when the wager ceased to be theoretical. It was no longer a game among bored men. It was a fault line. From that afternoon forward, Sebastian found himself seeking Beatrice's company under increasingly flimsy pretenses. A book he wished to discuss. A child's education he wanted her opinion on. A lecture he thought she might enjoy. Each visit stripped away another layer of his composure. Beatrice, for her part, refused to soften. She challenged him openly. His detachment, his indifference to the quiet cruelties of his class, his assumption that wealth insulated him from consequence. "You can afford to be aloof," she said once, "because the world bends around you." "And you cannot," he replied. "No," she agreed. "So I must be precise." The season watched. Whispers shifted. Curiosity sharpened. Women began to look at Beatrice with something like irritation rather than pity. Men noticed her. That alone would have been scandal enough. But the true danger came swiftly and without warning. It was Lord Ashcombe, smiling, oily, resentful of having lost his wager. "I merely wish to congratulate you," he said, intercepting Beatrice at a musicale. "You've become quite the fascination." She inclined her head coolly. "That was never my ambition." "Of course not," he replied smoothly. "But you must understand, people talk. I imagine they always have." His smile thinned. "They say the Duke is invested." Beatrice's spine stiffened. "You imply impropriety." "I imply," Ashcombe said lightly, "that reputations are fragile, particularly for women without protectors." The threat was unmistakable. That evening rumors ignited. A carriage seen leaving Montclair House late. A governess too familiar with the Duke. A wager turned sordid. By morning, Beatrice was no longer pitted. She was suspected. Sebastian learned of it in the worst way, through laughter and whites. "They say she planned it all," someone remarked. "Ambitious creature." "She knew exactly what she was doing," another agreed. "Men are weak." Sebastian stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. "Enough," he said coldly. The room fell silent. "Speak her name again with anything less than respect," he continued, "and I will personally ensure you regret it." The men stared. Sebastian did not care. He went to her at once. Beatrice received him with composure that masked exhaustion. "I warned you," she said quietly. This was inevitable. I will end it, he replied without hesitation. Publicly. Completely. Her gaze searched his face. At what cost to you? That is irrelevant. No, Beatrice said firmly. It is everything. She rose, moving toward the window. If you retreat now, the ton will believe the rumors were true. That I overreached. That I was discarded. Sebastian's chest tightened. What would you have me do? She turned back to him then, eyes clear, steady, unafraid. Claim me, she said. The word hung between them. Not privately, she continued. Not in whispers. In daylight. In front of everyone. You know what that means, he said hoarsely. Yes, Beatrice replied. It means you will be judged. Scrutinized. Questioned. It would bind me, he said. And free me, she answered softly. Sebastian looked at her, truly looked at her, and understood with startling clarity that this woman had never asked for rescue. She asked for recognition. I will escort you to the sovereign ball, he said at last. Not as a wager. Beatrice held his gaze. As what then? As the woman I choose. The truth of it struck him like a blow. This was no longer about defiance. It was about devotion. The sovereign ball was designed to intimidate. Held beneath the vaulted ceilings of Carlton House, it was not merely an event but a declaration. Of hierarchy, of power, of who belonged at the center and who orbited at a safe distance. Every candle, every note of music, every polished marble surface reminded its guests that this was where rank revealed itself most mercilessly. Beatrice Langley stood at the edge of the antechamber, her gloved hands trembling despite her resolve. She had never been meant for rooms like this. Not by birth, not by fortune, not by the unspoken verdict of society. Tonight she entered not as a governess lingering at the margins, but as the Duke of Montclair's chosen companion. The difference was suffocating. You may still withdraw, Sebastian said quietly beside her. She glanced up at him. He was immaculate, composed, his expression controlled, but she knew him well enough now to see the tension beneath it. This was not easy for him. That knowledge steadied her. If I do, Beatrice replied, they will decide it was fear. And if you stay, they will decide I am presumptuous. Sebastian's mouth curved faintly. Then we are agreed. We shall disappoint them all. He offered his arm. The moment she placed her hand upon it, the doors opened. Conversation died. Heads turned. Fans stilled. Whispers rippled outward like a shockwave. Beatrice felt the weight of 100 gazes press against her skin, felt herself measured and judged in the space of a single breath. She lifted her chin, drawing upon every lesson learned in years of quiet endurance. Sebastian did not rush her. He walked with deliberate calm, guiding her into the heart of the room as though she had always belonged there. She's too old, someone hissed. Ambitious, another murmured. Surely temporary. Sebastian heard them all. He ignored every word. When the orchestra struck up the opening waltz, he turned to her. Hey, I. Beatrice hesitated only a moment before nodding. They took the floor. At first she moved carefully, mindful of eyes, of scrutiny, of the thousand ways she could err. Then Sebastian's hand tightened slightly at her waist, grounding her. Look at me, he murmured. She did. And the room disappeared. He did not dance with the polished enthusiasm of men eager to impress. He danced with quiet certainty, attentive to her steps, adjusting instinctively when she faltered. You are thinking too much, he said softly. I am thinking of consequences. As am I, he replied. Yet I find myself undeterred. The music swelled. The ton watched. And something shifted. Not approval, never that, but confusion. Because Beatrice Langley did not look grateful. She looked assured. When the dance ended, applause followed, polite, restrained, edged with disbelief. Sebastian did not release her immediately. He leaned closer, his voice low. They are waiting for me to abandon you. Beatrice met his gaze. Then do not. I do not intend to. The confrontation came swiftly. Lady Harrington, resplendent in silver and entitlement, intercepted them near the refreshment table. "Your Grace," she said coolly. "May I have a word?" Sebastian inclined his head. "If you wish to speak, you may do so here." Her eyes flicked to Beatrice. "Alone?" "No," Sebastian said calmly. A murmur rippled outward. Lady Harrington stiffened. "You are placing yourself in an impossible position." "I am placing myself in an honest one." "You cannot mean to encourage this attachment." Sebastian's gaze hardened. "You will refer to Miss Langley with respect." Beatrice felt heat rise behind her eyes, not from shame but from the force of being defended without condition. "This will cost you," Lady Harrington warned. "Allies. Influence." Sebastian did not hesitate. Then they were never worth keeping. The final blow came from Lord Ashcombe. "So noble," he drawled. "But surely you don't mean to tether yourself to a governess long term." Sebastian turned fully to him. "I mean," he said, voice carrying effortlessly, "that I will not allow a woman of intelligence and integrity to be devoured by a society that mistakes cruelty for discernment." Silence fell. Beatrice's breath caught. "And," Sebastian continued, "any man who believes worth is measured by youth or fortune has no claim to my respect." Ashcombe flushed scarlet. The tongue reeled. Sebastian turned then not to them but to Beatrice. "If you wish to leave," he said softly, "I will escort you now." She searched his face, seeing the cost already mounting, the bridges burning behind him. "No," she replied. "I am precisely where I choose to be." The words sealed it. By night's end, alliances had fractured. Invitations would be withdrawn. Doors would close. Sebastian Montclair had shattered every expectation placed upon him. And for the first time in her life, Beatrice Langley walked through a ballroom knowing she was not borrowed confidence. She was chosen. London did not forgive quickly. The morning after the sovereign ball, society reacted not with outrage but with precision. Invitations failed to arrive. Familiar faces turned cool. Doors once open narrowed to polite slits. The tongue did what it always did best. It closed ranks. Sebastian Montclair noticed immediately. A scheduled meeting with a political ally was postponed indefinitely. A dinner invitation from a powerful dowager was rescinded with vague apologies. Even White's carried an undercurrent of tension, conversation halting when he entered, resuming only once he had passed. For the first time in his life, his name did not smooth his path. He found that he did not care. Beatrice, however, felt the cost more sharply. The Whitcombes were kind but uneasy. The governess's position, once secure through invisibility, now trembled under scrutiny. Mrs. Whitcomb spoke of circumstances and optics, her concern wrapped in regret. "I understand," Beatrice said calmly, packing her books into a modest trunk. "You need not apologize." "You could distance yourself," Mrs. Whitcomb ventured. "Publicly." Beatrice smiled, not bitterly but with quiet resolve. "I have spent too much of my life doing precisely that." She left the townhouse with nowhere specific to go, only the certainty that retreat would undo everything she had claimed. Sebastian found her that afternoon. She was walking through Kensington Gardens, hat drawn low, posture composed as ever. When she saw him, she stopped, but she did not soften. "They are closing in," she said simply. "Yes." "You could still step back," Beatrice continued. "Say the moment passed. Say it was infatuation." Sebastian shook his head. "I will not lie." Her throat tightened. "Then you will lose more than invitations." "I know. And you do not resent me?" He took her hands, unmindful of passers-by, of consequence. "I resent a world that tried to convince you that you were unworthy of being chosen," he said quietly. "I resent myself for not seeing sooner how easily I might have become complicit." Beatrice searched his face. "What do you want, Sebastian?" The use of his name felt momentous. "I want a life that is honest," he replied. "With you." Silence stretched between them, not empty but weighted with everything unsaid. "I will not be hidden," Beatrice said at last. "You will not be. I will not be corrected into compliance. I would not dare. I will not be an experiment," she finished. Sebastian's grip tightened. You are the opposite of that. Then, with a steadiness that made her breath catch, he said the words that mattered most. I am asking you to marry me. The world seemed to tilt. Beatrice's first instinct was disbelief, not because she doubted his sincerity, but because she understood the magnitude of the offer. Marriage would bind her permanently to scrutiny, to expectation, to a role she had never been permitted to imagine freely. Not as rescue, Sebastian added quickly. Not as defiance. As partnership. She closed her eyes. For years she had prepared herself for a future of usefulness rather than joy. She had learned to live without being seen, to love quietly, to expect little. This was everything. Yes, she said softly. But only if you continue to choose me when it becomes inconvenient. He smiled then, not the careful smile of a duke, but the unguarded one of a man who had finally surrendered. I already have. The engagement sent shockwaves through London. Some were outraged. Some were triumphant in their predictions of scandal. Others, quietly, begrudgingly, were forced to reconsider the rules they had accepted without question. Beatrice Langley became the Duchess of Montclair not through conquest, nor cunning, but through constancy. She did not transform into a society darling overnight. She did not soften her intelligence or temper her honesty to appease critics. She did not erase her past. She integrated it. In time, doors reopened, not because she begged but because the world adjusted to her refusal to disappear. Young women sought her counsel. Older ones watched with reluctant respect. And Sebastian, who had once believed himself untouchable, learned that devotion was not a loss of power, but its truest expression. Together they built a marriage that did not glitter for show but endured. A union not founded on illusion, but on the radical act of choosing and being chosen in full view of the world. Some love stories end with applause. Others end with fireworks. But the most dangerous ones, the ones that truly change us, end quietly, with a woman who refuses to disappear, with a man who chooses truth over comfort, with a world forced inch by inch to make room for a love at once dismissed. Beatrice Langley was never rescued. She was recognized. And perhaps that is the greatest romance of all. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe love should be earned, dignity defended, and women should never have to beg to be chosen, then you're already standing at the edge of Charlotte's Tidal Whispers. Here we tell stories for those who've been overlooked, underestimated, and told their moment has passed, only to prove that the tide always returns. Subscribe to Charlotte's Tidal Whispers for more slow-burn romances, quiet revenge and love stories that leave marks instead of noise. Share your thoughts in the comments. Did Beatrice's courage move you? And stay close. The next whisper is already rising.